My name is Vanessa Taylor. I'm 43 years old. And last Sunday, right after my father carved the ham at Mama's retirement dinner, he turned to me, in front of my brothers, my uncles, my own daughter, and shouted like I was a stranger off the street. "Did you take the $15,000 from the safe?" The room froze. Even the ceiling fan paused mid-spin, its blades catching the light like slow-motion shadows over the table. A drop of gravy slid from the spoon Mama was holding and hit her plate with a sound that felt too loud for a Sunday evening. I hadn't even finished chewing. No one moved. Not one. It was as if the air itself stopped to watch me swallow shame. My daughter Camille reached for my hand under the table. Her fingers were warm, shaking slightly. I didn't move, couldn't. My eyes were locked on the man who taught me to sign my name in cursive and to speak clearly at church announcements. Now he looked at me like a stranger wearing his daughter's face. His white collar was stiff with starch, the knot of his tie pressed tight against his throat. Grease from the ham gleamed on his fingertips as he pointed toward me. The vein at his temple beat so hard I could almost hear it. And still, I said nothing, because I needed to see how deep the cut really went. It went deep, baby, deeper than blood. My father, Raymond Taylor, has always been a man of volume. He believes truth must be loud to be believed. When he speaks, walls vibrate. When he points, people move. He built Taylor Funeral Home that way. 3 generations deep in Montgomery, right on Carter Street, where everybody knows the sign with our last name painted in gold on black. We even buried the mayor's cousin last year. People still bring us pies at Christmas for how we handled their people. That's how deep our name runs. I'm his only daughter, oldest of 4. He used to call me First Lady of the Family Business when I was just a teenager filing death certificates on his desk, my hands smelling like ink and formaldehyde. I grew up hearing grief before I understood what it was. I've missed birthdays, graduations, a whole chapter of Camille's childhood, all for that place. 27 years I gave him, and all it took was one missing stack of bills to erase it. He didn't ask because he wanted truth. He asked because he'd already decided I was guilty. It started a week before Mama's dinner. She was retiring after 31 years teaching 2nd grade. Marcus, Kendall, and Deshawn wanted to throw a little party at the house. Something nice. I handled the caterer. Camille made the place cards with gold ink pens. Mama wanted black and gold, her school colors. But 2 days before the dinner, I walked into the funeral home and heard voices rising from the back office. "He said it was in the safe," Uncle Troy snapped, "and now it ain't there." I froze by the hallway, the smell of pine sol and flowers mixing in my nose. "Don't say that too loud," Daddy warned. His tone was low, controlled. $15,000, Ray, that don't just walk away." My chest tightened. My name was coming. I felt it like a storm rolling in. Maybe Vanessa moved it. And there it was. I didn't move, didn't breathe. Just stood there between 2 caskets waiting to be picked up Monday morning, listening to men I grew up serving Sunday dinners with talk about me like I was a suspect. Daddy didn't even flinch. Didn't say, "No, not my daughter." Didn't say a word to defend me. "We'll ask her at the dinner," he said. 4 words that felt like a sentence. So when he stood after Grace and pointed that finger across the table, I knew he'd been waiting for this moment. "Tell me to my face," he said, "if you touch that money." I set my fork down. The silver clink sounded like a gun cocking. "Why would I take money out the safe, Daddy? You tell me." His voice hit the ceiling, bounced off the crown molding. Collard greens steamed on plates. No one moved. Kendall reached for another roll like he was deaf. Deshawn looked at his phone like the screen held the Lord himself. Mama whispered, "Raymond, please, not today." But she didn't stand up. That silence, that was the real betrayal. That safe has sat behind the panel in the family office since before I was born. Old brown Mosler, rust at the edges, handle cold even in July. He taught me the combination when I was 18, just in case something happens to me, he said. Since then, I've locked everything in there. Insurance checks, funeral payments, petty cash, even notes from clients thanking us for handling their loved ones with grace. But Daddy never trusted digital banks, said paper trails make cowards. That cash was his real money, the kind that made him feel in control. So when it disappeared and only 2 people knew the code, he did the math his way. But I knew something he didn't. 3 weeks before the dinner, I came in early. Morning sun cut through the stained glass in the lobby, dust floating like souls. I found the safe ajar, not open, just unlatched. Inside, 2 small envelopes missing, both marked travel expense and church account. I told him. He shrugged. Probably miscounted. Didn't even look inside. That's when I knew something was off. So I changed the code. Didn't tell him. Wrote it on a Post-it, sealed it in an envelope, and slid it into my desk drawer. Bottom 1, beneath the tax files. Insurance, I called it. Because lately Daddy had been moving different. Quiet phone calls, unmarked deposits, helping people I didn't recognize. The smell of secrets hung around him like old aftershave. So when he yelled that day, I was ready. Not for the humiliation, but for the truth that would follow. "Camille," he barked, "get your mother to answer." She flinched. I stood, slow, deliberate, chair scraping wood. That sound cut through every heartbeat in that room. "If you think I took the money, Daddy," I said softly, "check the drawer in my office, 3rd one down, envelopes waiting for you." Then I walked out. Didn't grab my purse, didn't grab my coat, left my plate untouched. Ham, greens, mac and cheese cooling under the AC hum. The porch light hit the rain-slicked driveway as I stepped into the night. Somewhere, a train whistled. The sound felt like freedom and funeral bells at once. I sat in my car, hands on the wheel, staring at the reflection of the porch in my rear-view mirror. Didn't cry. Just listened to the ceiling fan through the window screen and the buzz of a June bug against the light. 20 minutes later, Camille slipped into the passenger seat. "You okay?" she asked, voice thin. I kept my eyes ahead. "I'm just tired." Of being the backbone and the blame, of saving faces that wouldn't save mine. She nodded slow, didn't press, just watched the rain streak down the windshield and whispered, "He should have known better." I exhaled. Yeah, but I knew something else too. That he was opening that drawer right then, finding that envelope and realizing he wasn't the only one who knew how to keep records. I didn't need to fight, I just had to wait, because truth moves like the dead. Slow at first, then sudden and unavoidable. And when it rises, everybody has to look. The rain softened to a whisper. The porch light blinked twice and held. Inside the house, voices rose and fell. I sat there breathing in the smell of wet earth and cornbread through the cracked window, watching steam fog the glass, watching myself disappear and reappear with every breath. The night didn't give me answers, but it gave me space. And sometimes space is where truth starts to breathe again. I wasn't born with my daddy's temper. I was born with my mama's silence. That kind of silence that folds napkins during chaos, that smiles too tight when insulted in public, that hums a gospel under its breath while scrubbing dishes like prayer. But silence doesn't mean weak. It means we listen first, and when we finally speak, it lands. I learned that the hard way. I was 9 when I saw my daddy slap Uncle Troy at the 4th of July cookout, right there between the ribs and the potato salad. Smoke from the grill floated between them like a curtain, and when Daddy's hand came down, it cut through that smoke like lightning. Nobody talked about it. Nobody moved. Folks just looked at their plates and chewed slow. The cicadas outside were loud enough to fill the silence, and Mama whispered, "Take Camille inside." Like my small body could unsee what my eyes already memorized. But I remembered the sound, the stillness after, the way everybody went back to eating like nothing happened, And that's how our family worked. We don't talk about problems, we bury them. Just like at the funeral home. You put on a black dress, you say, God is good. You keep it moving. So when Daddy accused me of stealing $15,000 and my brothers didn't flinch, baby, I wasn't surprised. It wasn't the first time loyalty bowed to hierarchy. It's just the first time it pointed straight at me. Back when I was 17, Daddy let me embalm my first body. Yes, for real. Mr. Lawrence Greer, 66 years old, died in his sleep. I remember the smell of bleach mixed with carnations, the hum of the fluorescent lights, the cold steel table that made my hands shake. His fingers were folded like he'd been praying when he passed. Daddy stood beside me, arms crossed. You want this life, Vanessa? He said. Then you start by respecting the dead. He never said, I'm proud of you. He just said, next time, wear gloves that fit. That was his love language, critique. Mine was showing up anyway. I went to Alabama State, majored in business, minored in grief counseling. Every weekend, I drove back to Montgomery, answering phones at the funeral home, taking flower deliveries, writing death notices on index cards. I learned how to smile steady when people cried, how to say, take your time, when I had 5 other families waiting in line. Daddy worked the lobby like a preacher and a politician rolled in one. His voice carried over every sob. His presence filled the room, and I filled the silence. When Mama got sick in 2006, I ran that place 4 months straight, paid every bill, drove every limo, filed every permit. When he came back, he didn't say thank you, didn't even ask how I'd managed. He just said, glad you ain't messed nothing up. That was his way of love, through order, not affection, through control, not trust. I tell you this because I need you to understand something deeper than money. I didn't take that $15,000, but even if I had, I earned more than that in sweat and sacrifice years ago. When my brothers were chasing degrees and new zip codes, I stayed, kept the business running, kept the house lights on, kept our family name from fading off Carter Street, and now that same fire I tended is threatening to burn me alive. The day after the dinner, Daddy didn't call, didn't text, didn't show his face, but I did what I always do. I showed up. Unlocked the door to the funeral home. The bell above it chimed soft. Inside smelled like lemon polish and old flowers. I turned on the lights one by one, brewed a pot of Maxwell House, watered Mama's peace lily in the corner. Then I went to my desk. The envelope was gone, which meant he'd found it. That envelope wasn't cash. It wasn't receipts. It was proof. A printed photo. Still frame from the tiny camera above the office door. The one Daddy didn't know about. The image showed my cousin Derek, after hours, standing near the safe. Not opening it, just looking around. Looking too long. He worked part-time cleaning the chapel. Claimed he came in to pick up a jacket, but his eyes told another story. I printed that photo the morning after it happened, slid it into that envelope with a note that said only the date and time. And now, it was gone. I didn't need to guess who took it. Sometimes protecting yourself means preparing for betrayal, even when it shares your bloodline. I still remember Daddy's face the night Camille was born. She came early, small and loud, wrapped in pink. He held her and whispered, "Looks just like her mama." That was the softest I ever saw him, but somewhere between then and now, that softness hardened, turned into suspicion, control, maybe fear of losing what he built, or fear of realizing I could run it better. Mama stopped by that evening with a glass dish of banana pudding, still warm at the bottom, foil folded neat. The smell hit me before she even stepped inside. She set it on the counter, didn't speak for a minute, just smoothed the foil and sighed. "I told him not to ask you like that," she said finally. I stayed quiet, drying a cup that didn't need drying. She sat down at the table, shoulders low. "He's scared, Vanessa. That money was for the new chapel wing, for expansion. He doesn't know what to do." I looked up. Then he should have asked me like I was his daughter, not some thief. Her eyes glistened but didn't spill. Her voice softened to almost a prayer. "You don't know how to say sorry." I nodded slow. "That's not my fault." She reached for my hand, but I pulled back, gentle. The air between us was heavy with 27 years of unsaid things. When she left, the house didn't feel peaceful. It felt hollow, like every wall had been listening. Camille was in her room with headphones on, pretending not to hear, but I saw the way her chest rose too fast, the way she wiped her face quick when I passed by. She loved her grandfather. He taught her to fish at Tuskegee Creek, bought her first bike, brought her candy from every church home going he worked. Now she saw the cracks, the ones I'd spent decades patching with silence. Generational hurt has its own echo. It doesn't shout, it hums. The next morning, I woke before sunrise. Couldn't sleep. The house smelled faintly of yesterday's coffee. I stood by the window watching the first light stretch across the driveway. By habit, I drove to the funeral home again. Carter Street was quiet, dew glistening on the hearse like sweat. The front door was unlocked. Inside, one light burned over the office. The hum of the AC filled the silence. On my desk lay a yellow legal pad, 5 words written in block letters. "You got the wrong one." No name, no signature. Just those 5 words. I didn't panic, didn't flinch. I sat down slow. The chair creaked, the air heavy with the scent of furniture polish and wilted lilies. That wasn't a warning. That was a message from someone who wanted me to know I wasn't alone in this, or maybe someone who wanted to scare me quiet. Either way, the silence that followed told me more than words ever could, because silence, real silence, carries the truth louder than any confession. I looked around that office I'd practically built from the ground up. The diplomas on the wall, the stack of client folders, the photo of me and Daddy at the ribbon-cutting ceremony 10 years ago. He had his arm around me, smiling proud. That man looked gone now. Maybe the money wasn't the point anymore. Maybe it was about control, about legacy, about who gets to hold the keys when the old guard starts trembling. I traced the edge of that yellow pad with my thumb, paper rough, words pressed deep, and I whispered to the empty room, "Not this time." Because I've buried too many people to let another man write my obituary while I'm still breathing, especially not my own father. The clock on the wall ticked once, twice, loud enough to make the air move. Outside, church bells rang faint from down the street, mixing with the faint buzz of the ceiling fan above me. I leaned back, eyes closed, breathing through my nose slow. The smell of cornbread still lingered in my hair from Mama's kitchen. The world felt heavy and slow, but steady, because I knew something now. This wasn't about theft. It was about truth crawling out from the dirt. One secret at a time. And once it starts rising, baby, you can't bury it again. By the 3rd day, folks had already picked a side, and it wasn't mine. Word spread fast, like fire catching dry pine needles in August heat. One whisper at the Piggly Wiggly turned into 3 by the time it hit the Food Lion parking lot. Somebody's cousin told somebody's aunt, and before the sun even dropped, I was already the headline nobody asked for. They said I'd been skimming. They said I used the funeral home like my personal ATM. They said I was bitter, because Daddy never signed the business over to me. Funny how loyalty dries up the minute gossip gets loud. My phone rang that morning. Cousin Danielle. Didn't even say hello. "Girl, I heard about Sunday," she said. Her voice was all syrup and nosiness. "They say you stole the whole 15 like it was yours." I didn't respond. She laughed that nervous laugh people use when they want to believe you, but they're not sure if they can. I told them they better hush. Nessa don't play with money. But, you didn't though, right? That right hung in the air like smoke off a cheap candle. I let silence do the work, because silence is a mirror, and some folks can't stand what they see reflected back. By the time I hung up, my coffee had gone cold. The hum of the ceiling fan above me was the only thing that didn't sound judgmental. The next funeral was scheduled for Thursday. The Johnson family. Sweet people, church folks, the kind who still send handwritten thank you notes. Mama called that afternoon. "Maybe let your father and the boys handle it this time," she said softly. "Stay home, baby. Let things cool down." I knew what that meant. They were trying to isolate me, erase me, without saying the word. I told her, "No, Mama, I'm showing up." Because sometimes the only way to hold your name steady is to keep walking into the fire. Thursday morning came heavy. The air was thick, that southern kind of humidity that sits on your shoulders like weight. I curled my hair, pressed my navy suit, slipped on my pearls, looked at myself in the mirror and whispered, "Stand tall." Camille kissed my cheek before school. "They better not try you again, Ma." I smiled for her sake, but inside I felt steel. You only have to bury your pride once to learn how to resurrect your dignity. When I got to the funeral home, the chapel was already filling up. The sound of low murmurs and gospel organ drifted down the hallway. I could smell cologne, starch, and fried chicken from the repast kitchen. Daddy stood near the front, shaking hands with Deacon Sam like nothing had happened. Uncle Troy was at the door passing out programs. I walked in and felt every eye slide toward me. Not strangers, family. My blood. Kendall looked me dead in the face, jaw tight, then turned away. Marcus whispered something to Deshawn. They both chuckled, low. Nobody said my name out loud, but I could feel it dancing on their tongues. That's when I learned something new. Judgment doesn't always sound like words. Sometimes it's just the way a room breathes around you. The service ended fine. Mr. Johnson's widow hugged me, said I had her husband looking like peace itself. I thanked her, straightened her shawl. But when we moved to the repast, the air shifted again. Chicken, mac and cheese, deviled eggs, sweet tea sweating in plastic cups, the smell of comfort food thick enough to cover any discomfort. I was at the drinks table, refilling pitchers, when I heard Daddy's voice behind me, loud, sharp. I said, "Check the damn numbers yourself then." Every head turned. He was facing Mr. Calvin, our funeral director. The poor man looked like he wanted to vanish into the carpet. And then Daddy saw me. His voice dropped, but not low enough. "Better ask Vanessa," he muttered. "She got all the answers lately." The room went still. Again. Just like Sunday, the same air, the same shame. But this time, I didn't freeze. I didn't let him see me break. I turned, slow, smiled like calm water and said, "Only thing I'm guilty of is showing up when nobody else would." Then I walked out. My heels clicked down that hallway like punctuation marks. I went straight to the office, locked the door. The faint buzz of the AC filled the silence. I stood there for a moment, breathing steady, the smell of furniture polish thick in the air. Then I pulled open my drawer. The camera USB was still there. I plugged it into the old desktop tower. The fan inside whirred to life like it hadn't been touched in years. Clicked through the folders. 2:46 a.m., 2 Fridays ago. There he was, Derek, in Daddy's office, using a key, not mine, not his, but one that matched the extra set Mama kept in her purse, the one she swore she'd lost months ago. I knew that key's glint, brass worn at the tip. He opened the safe, calm, no rush, pulled out 3 envelopes, didn't count, didn't hesitate, just tucked them under his coat and left. But before he did, he looked straight into the corner, right where the camera lens sat, like he knew he was being watched. That wasn't nerves. That was intention. That's when it hit me. This wasn't just theft. This was setup. I printed the stills, one by one. The sound of the paper feeder clicking felt like a metronome to my heartbeat. Slipped them into a new envelope. Wrote one word on the front in red ink, insurance. Then locked it back in my drawer, because I wasn't done yet. I wasn't about to swing wild without proof. When you've lived your whole life surrounded by caskets, you learn not to act until you're sure what's dead. That night, Camille came to my room with her blanket in her arms. Her eyes were glassy. "Can we go stay at Aunt Rhonda's for a while?" I looked up from my laptop. "Why?" She hesitated, shifting from one foot to the other. "Because Grandpa yelled at me too, yesterday." Everything in me went still. What did he say? She swallowed hard. He said, "Tell your mama to stop playing games before somebody gets hurt." My body went cold from the inside out. That wasn't a warning. That was a threat. Later that night, I sat out on the porch barefoot, glass of lemon water in my hand, the condensation dripping down my fingers. The porch light reflected off the wet wood from last night's rain. Somewhere down the street, a dog barked once, then quieted. The moon hung low, full and watching. I thought about all the people we'd buried in that funeral home, some with peace, some with secrets. I thought about how betrayal feels the same as grief, just with the body still moving. And for the first time in years, I realized I wasn't just being framed. I was being erased, quietly, strategically, like I'd never existed, like my 27 years in that building were dust. I whispered to the dark, they must have forgot who taught them how to lock that safe. Then I went inside, pulled out my leather-bound journal, the one with the cracked spine and ink stains from back when I still believed notes could save me. I started making a list, names, timestamps, account numbers I remembered from memory, the small details Daddy thought I never noticed. Because sometimes revenge ain't loud, sometimes it's organized. Before bed, I texted a lawyer I'd met months ago at Camille's school fundraiser. Her name was Alexis Green, sharp, calm, and the kind of woman who looks people straight in the eye. She specialized in family business disputes. I remembered her handing me her card that night saying, "You never know when you might need someone neutral." At the time, I laughed. Now I typed, "Hi, I may need your help with something that could turn ugly." I hit send, watched the 3 dots blink, then disappear. The house was silent except for the soft tick of the kitchen clock and the faint hum of the fridge. Camille was asleep in her room, one hand hanging off the bed. I walked down the hallway passing the old family photo, the one from my college graduation. Daddy in his gray suit, Mama smiling proud, me holding my diploma. I touched the glass lightly. Some pictures don't age well once you know the truth behind the smiles. I went back to my room, turned off the light, and sat on the edge of the bed. The night air drifted in through the window screen, the smell of wet earth and magnolia, and I promised myself something. They could smear my name. They could whisper my story wrong, but they would not write my ending. I didn't go into work for 3 days, not because I was scared, because I wanted to see who would notice. Nobody called, not Daddy, not my brothers, not even Mama. That's the kind of silence you don't unhear. It isn't absence, it's exile. Camille kept checking my phone every hour, thumb hovering over the screen like she was waiting on a miracle text. "Maybe they think you need space," she said softly. I didn't answer, because I've given this family plenty of space. Space to lie, space to accuse, space to pretend I'm invisible. Now I was giving them silence back. And silence, that's not passive, it's strategy. The funeral home didn't fall apart without me. Of course not. Kendall handled the front desk, voice all professional. Deshawn picked up the flower deliveries in the van that still had my perfume lingering in the seats. Daddy walked around the building like the king of stability, but I knew the cracks were there. You don't spend your life holding a house together and not feel when the beams start to shake. The faint buzz of the ceiling fan, the smell of old lilies in the hallway. Those walls know everything. Every argument, every lie whispered over a body cooling in satin. And still, nobody checked on me. That's when I realized maybe they thought I'd fold, but I wasn't built to fold. I was built to rise quiet. On the 4th day, Mama showed up. No banana pudding this time, no casserole dish wrapped in foil, just an envelope in her hand. and a look I'd never seen before. Not anger, not sadness. Something caught between fear and apology. She came in slow, her house shoes whispering against my kitchen tile. The porch light was still on behind her, glowing against the wet wood from last night's rain. She sat down at the kitchen table, exhaled heavy. "I found this behind the dresser in the guest room," she said. I took the envelope. It was thin, soft at the edges, smelled faintly of dust and hand lotion. Inside, cash, old bills, 20s, 50s, crinkled but counted clean, 2,000 flat. My jaw tightened. She looked up at me, eyes wet but steady. "I ain't tell Raymond yet," she said. I nodded. Didn't speak, because I knew what that meant. She didn't believe me before, but she did now. And that's a different kind of ache, when vindication finally comes, but too late to feel sweet. That night, I sat at my desk with the USB drive in my hand. Small thing, just a sliver of plastic and wire, but it carried everything. My safety, my story, my truth. I turned it over between my fingers, the lamplight catching the metal edge. Sometimes the lightest things in life carry the heaviest proof. I knew sooner or later I'd have to use it. The next morning, I dressed in all black. Not for mourning, for focus. Black slacks, black turtleneck, low heels polished to a soft shine. Camille made eggs and toast before school. She packed me lunch even though I didn't ask. She leaned in close, kissed my cheek. "Be careful, Ma." I smiled. Always. And I meant it. Because when a woman gets quiet, truly quiet, that's when she's most dangerous. When I walked back into Taylor Funeral Home, the lobby went still. The air felt thick with something unspoken. Deshawn froze mid-sentence on the phone. Kendall's hand hovered over the appointment book. Even the AC hummed softer, like it knew better than to interrupt. Daddy's office door was closed. I walked straight past them all, head high, steps light, shoulders squared. Power doesn't announce itself. Sometimes it just walks in the room and doesn't blink. I spent 3 hours working, quiet but deliberate. Reviewed client files, updated insurance folders, backed up the hard drives to the cloud. The small noises, the printer's low hum, the click of my pen, the paper sliding into manila folders. Those were my heartbeat. Nobody spoke to me. Not even Mama, who I knew was upstairs in the break room nursing coffee that had gone cold. That was fine. I wasn't there to be liked. I was there to reclaim my presence. Because sometimes showing up, just showing up, is the loudest revenge there is. Right before closing, I walked into Daddy's office. He didn't look up, didn't greet me, just kept scribbling on a yellow legal pad, his handwriting jagged and uneven. The desk lamp lit half his face. The other half stayed in shadow. I set a folder down on the desk. He kept writing, so I said it. Calm, measured, like scripture being read from the pulpit. "That envelope Mama found, the one with the 2,000 in it, you need to think real hard about who's been staying in that guest room lately." His pen froze mid-stroke. Not a word, not a breath, and I walked out. No fireworks, no shouting, just truth, delivered like a blade, wrapped in velvet. That night, Camille and I sat in the living room watching Jeopardy. Neither of us cared about the answers. She leaned her head on my shoulder. The faint buzz of the ceiling fan filled the pauses between questions. After a long while, she asked, "Are you going to show Grandpa the video?" I didn't answer right away, because the question wasn't if, it was when. I needed the moment to be public, not for drama, for documentation, because when Black women defend themselves, folks love to twist it, say we were emotional. I wasn't giving them that. I was giving them receipts. Later that night, I texted Ms. Lenora, the lawyer from Camille's school fundraiser, told her everything, the money, the footage, the silence. She called me within minutes. Her voice was warm but sharp, like a woman who's heard too many versions of this story before. Vanessa, she said, this isn't just family drama. If they're slandering your name publicly, trying to push you out of a business you built, that's actionable. My breath caught slow. So what do I do? She paused. I heard papers rustle on her end. You let them play their hand, she said. Then we show them yours. That line stayed in my chest. Let them play their hand, then show them yours. Sometimes strategy looks like patience. The next day was Friday. Sky over Montgomery gray and heavy, the kind of day where thunder thinks twice before speaking. I was sitting at my kitchen table sorting files into neat stacks when Camille rushed in from school, her face pale, eyes wide. She held something out. Folded paper. Somebody left this on my windshield. Typed. No handwriting. Folded clean. Stay out of grown folks' business. You don't know who you're dealing with. No name. No address. Just words. Sharp. Cowardly. But we both knew where it came from. That moment. That was when fear tried to sneak in. Not for me. For her. Because it's one thing for them to come at me. But when they crossed over to my child, the game changed. I took the note, unfolded it again, laid it flat on the table. The paper crackled under my fingertips. Camille watched me, waiting for panic. I gave her calm instead. Baby, I said softly. They're trying to scare us. She frowned. Are you scared? I looked her dead in the eye. I bury the dead for a living. Her lips parted. So? So there's not much that rattles me anymore. That night, while the house slept, I printed out the note, slid it into a manila folder alongside the stills from the camera footage. Then I made 2 more copies. One went into my glove compartment. One I mailed to Ms. Lenora. The original, the one with the faint coffee stain on the corner, that one I kept separate, because that's the one everybody was going to see. The next time they came for me in public, the room would fall silent again, but not from shame, from truth. Because this time, when the silence hit, it'd be mine. The Sunday after the silence broke, my phone rang just past noon. Miss Evelyn. She's not blood, but she raised half of us like we came from her own ribs. Mama's oldest friend from Mount Zion Baptist, 72, hips bad, eyes clear as creek water. Always wore her head wrap like a crown, always smelled faintly of shea butter and cinnamon oil. Vanessa, she said, her voice slow, rich, certain. You got time for some tea? And when a woman like that calls, you make time. I drove over to Cloverdale with my windows cracked, air thick with August heat. Cicadas screamed in the trees. A Waffle House sign flickered down the block, buzzing like it was trying to stay alive. By the time I turned down her street, the smell of honeysuckle had already started to calm my nerves. She was waiting on the porch, 2 rocking chairs, a tray of lemon tea with honey, ceiling fan turning slow above our heads, the wood under my feet still damp from morning rain. She didn't ask how I was, didn't need to. She looked me up and down once, eyes gentle but sharp. You carrying it all in your shoulders, she said. Let me help you unpack it. For the next hour, I told her everything. From the moment Daddy carved the ham and accused me in front of God and the family, to the silence that followed me through the chapel halls, to Camille's note on her windshield, folded neat like a threat wrapped in manners. I told her about the missing money, the USB, the footage, the envelope Mama found behind that dresser. I told her how tired I was, tired of proving I belonged inside a legacy I helped build with both hands. She listened, didn't interrupt, didn't fill the pauses with scripture, just poured more tea when the silence got too long. Sometimes you don't need advice. You need someone who can hold your story without shaking. When I finally stopped talking, the air was thick with truth. The faint buzz of that porch fan was the only sound between us. Ms. Evelyn took a slow sip, then looked straight through me. They're not just trying to take your place, baby, she said. They're trying to rewrite the story, without you in it. That line hit like gospel. She leaned forward, elbows on her knees. Let me ask you something, she said. If the house burns down, who do they call? I blinked. Me. And when a family shows up crying, broken, don't know what to do, who do they lean on? Me, I said again, quieter. She nodded. Then don't you ever let folks confuse your silence for absence. You're still the anchor, and the anchor don't move just 'cause the wave's loud. That moment shifted something in me. She didn't hand me revenge. She handed me clarity. And Lord, sometimes clarity's heavier than fire. When I got home, the sky was that soft orange just before evening gives up. Camille was in the kitchen, baking cornbread. The pau smell wrapped the whole house in memory. She turned the radio down when I walked in. "You look lighter," she said. I smiled. "I feel heavier, actually, but in a good way." She laughed, confused but trusting. I told her about Ms. Evelyn, about her porch, her words, her stillness, about how she reminded me I wasn't gone, I was grounded, and I told her it was time. Next morning, I pulled an old picture from a storage box. Taylor Funeral Home. The ribbon-cutting day back in 1979. Daddy in his prime. Mama smiling wide. Me on her hip, wearing a red bow bigger than my face. I printed a fresh copy, slid it into a simple black frame. Across the bottom, I wrote in gold marker, Taylor Legacy, 1979 to now. Then I slid that USB drive right behind the photo. Symbolism, maybe, but also strategy. Let them think I'm sentimental. Let them think I'm soft. Because soft women know how to cut the deepest and smile while doing it. Tuesday morning, I walked into Daddy's office while he was on the phone. The air smelled like coffee and control. He looked up, just for a second, and froze like he'd seen a ghost still walking. I didn't sit, didn't speak. Just placed a sealed manila envelope on his desk. Inside, the camera stills of Derek near the safe, a typed timeline of every suspicious movement that week, a photo of Camille's windshield note, and one single sentence at the bottom, I will not be erased. He didn't open it, didn't say a word, so I did. You may not believe me, I said quietly, but this proves everything, and if it don't, ask Mama where she found that cash. His pen stopped moving. I turned and left. No yelling, no dramatics, just footsteps soft on tile. A woman walking out with her dignity intact. That evening, just before sunset, Kendall showed up at my door. First time in months. Didn't call first. Camille answered, arms folded. She's busy. He shifted from foot to foot. Just 5 minutes. I let him in. He stood in the doorway like a boy who'd been caught cheating on a test. I didn't know Derek was staying in the guest room, he started. I swear. I waited. And I didn't know about the safe or the note to Camille or... I cut him off. But you believed I did it. His mouth opened, then closed. I nodded once. That's all I needed to know. He sighed, reached into his pocket, and pulled out a flash drive. What's this? I asked. Footage from the chapel hallway camera, he said, shows Derek coming in after hours, twice. I took it from him. Didn't say thank you, just opened the door. He hesitated, waiting for grace. But grace doesn't always sound like forgiveness. Sometimes it sounds like a door clicking shut, and that's exactly what I gave him. Later that night, I found Camille curled on the couch with a blanket over her knees. She looked up, eyes half worried, half hopeful. You okay? She asked. I nodded, sat beside her, and pulled her close. We're not victims, I whispered. We're witnesses. Witnesses to what? The truth. She smiled faintly. You sound like Miss Evelyn. I kissed her forehead. I hope so. The house was quiet except for the faint hum of the refrigerator and the crackle of a candle burning low on the table. Outside, church bells drifted from down the street, soft, distant, like they were reminding me the hour still belonged to me. At 3 a.m., my phone buzzed on the nightstand. A message from an unknown number. You should have kept quiet. No name, no punctuation, just threat in plain text. I stared at it a long time. Didn't reply, didn't panic, just took a screenshot. added it to my growing file, then placed the phone face down and exhaled slow. Because grace doesn't mean you let people play with your peace. Grace means you stay ready, but move with poise. The moonlight leaked through the blinds, drawing lines across my floor. Somewhere outside, the porch light flickered, catching on wet wood. I could smell the last of Camille's cornbread cooling on the counter. And right then, I understood something Ms. Evelyn had been trying to tell me. Peace isn't the absence of war. It's the confidence you've already won. So the next time somebody raises their voice at me, I won't flinch. I'll raise my receipts and let silence finish the sentence. By Friday morning, I had 3 folders spread across my desk. One said evidence, one said ownership, and the last said options. That's how you know a woman's done crying, when her files start getting organized. The coffee on my nightstand had gone cold. My pen was leaking a little blue onto my fingers. Didn't even bother to wipe it. That stain was proof of work, of movement, of purpose. Ms. Lenora called right on time, 9 a.m. sharp. "Ready to talk legacy?" she asked. Her voice had that professional calm, the kind that tells you she's about to change your life, but she'll do it slow enough to keep you steady. I told her yes, and I meant it. Not revenge, not drama, legacy. Because what they were trying to take from me wasn't just money. It was history. It was the story, the years, the blood, the right to say, I helped build this. Taylor Funeral Home still sat under Daddy's name, legally, fully. The sign out front still read, R. Taylor and Family. Only now I realized I'd been the and family all along. But folks didn't know what was sitting in my safe at home. Back in 2012, Daddy had a stroke, mild but enough to scare him quiet. His speech slurred for a week. His left hand shook when he tried to write checks. That week, he called me into the office, told me to sit down, pulled out a manila folder that smelled faintly of cigar smoke and Lysol. Just in case, he'd said. Inside, a durable power of attorney. Guess whose name sat at the top? Mine. When Miss Lenora saw it, she didn't even blink, just read it all the way through. Then she leaned back in her chair and said, "This gives you full authority to manage all business and financial affairs during any period of incapacitation." I nodded, fingers drumming lightly against my desk. "He's not incapacitated now," I said, "but he sure wasn't operating with sound judgment when he accused me in front of 50 people, or when he ignored evidence sitting right in his hands." She raised an eyebrow. "Then it's time to talk next steps." That was the moment something clicked inside me. Fear turned into form, anger turned into paperwork, pain turned into proof. I filed for temporary conservatorship that following Monday. Didn't make an announcement, didn't post a thing, no Facebook captions, no family group texts. I just walked into the Montgomery County Courthouse, black slacks, white blouse, hair pulled tight, and handed the clerk a folder thick with receipts, photos, and affidavits. Sometimes dignity wears slacks and a smile. Sometimes it files petitions in silence. That same afternoon, I drove straight to the funeral home, changed the locks, not the front ones, the private ones, the safe, the filing room, the digital portal for payments and client archives. Then I sat down and updated every password one by one: insurance account, payroll system, storage drive, camera feeds. When I finished, I leaned back and exhaled slow. That's what power feels like. Not loud, not flashy, quiet, certain. By evening, my phone rang. Deshawn. Panicked. "What's going on, Vanessa? I can't log into the scheduling portal." "Internal audit," I said simply. "Standard protocol." He hesitated. "Is this about the money?" I stayed silent, because power doesn't need to explain. It just moves. Over the next few days, Camille helped me print large laminated posters for the chapel hallway. She titled them Legacy Timeline. Each poster had photos: Grandpa Taylor shaking hands with mourners back in the 60s, Daddy and Mama cutting the ribbon in 79, me, 25, standing in the chapel next to a widow whose hands I held until she stopped shaking. At the bottom, Camille added one line in gold lettering: "Respect the ones who held the door open for you." The message wasn't subtle, but neither was the disrespect I'd been handed. Thursday afternoon, Marcus showed up uninvited, brought Derek with him. They stood outside my office like two boys called to the principal. Marcus cleared his throat. "We heard what you filed." I nodded. "Good." He shifted, glanced at Derek. "You really think Daddy can't run the business?" "I think," I said slowly, "he lost sight of who already has." Derek looked nervous. His hands twisted his cap round and round. "I didn't mean for it to go this far," he muttered. I raised an eyebrow. "You wrote threats to my daughter." He shook his head fast. I cut him off. "You folded the paper twice, same crease you make when you pocket catering tips. I recognized it." He froze. Color drained from his face. Silence filled the room, thick, electric. I leaned back in my chair. "You've got one option left," I said softly. "Return what you took, in full, or I press charges and let the courts pull your phone records." They left without speaking. That's how I knew they understood. That night, around 8 so, my phone buzzed. A text from Daddy. Just 5 words. "We need to talk, Sunday night." I stared at it. Camille sat next to me, homework spread across the table. "You going?" she asked quietly. I looked at her. Really looked. Saw her eyes reflecting the same exhaustion I felt. "I don't know yet," I said, because I wasn't sure if I was walking into a funeral or a resurrection. Sunday came like a slow song. I wore navy, not black, not white, balanced, controlled. When I pulled into the driveway, the porch light was already on, flickering faintly against the damp wood. The smell of Mama's cornbread drifted from the kitchen. She opened the door before I knocked. Her face looked different, older, thinner, like silence had carved lines where laughter used to live. "Come on in," she whispered. The living room was full. Marcus, Deshawn, Kendall, Uncle Troy, even Derek sitting small in the corner, and Daddy standing by the fireplace framed by oak and pride. "Vanessa," he said finally, voice low, rough. "Come sit." I didn't. I stayed standing, because some thrones are illusions, and I'd built my kingdom standing up. He started slow. "I've made mistakes," he said, "not just lately, but for years." No one spoke. He kept going. I let fear make me cruel, let pride blind me. The air in the room felt heavy, like even the furniture was holding its breath. He turned toward me, and I forgot who built this place with me. My throat tightened, but I didn't speak. Forgiveness isn't a door. It's a hallway, and we weren't through it yet. Then he reached behind him, pulled out an envelope, thick, heavy. My name written across the front in his careful handwriting. Vanessa, I took it, opened it slow. Inside, a deed of gift transferring 40% equity of the funeral home to me, a typed statement acknowledging my years of contribution, and a cashier's check for $15,000. He cleared his throat. "That money wasn't meant to go missing," he said quietly. "It was meant to go to you. I just didn't know how to let go." The room stayed still. I looked around, saw shame where smugness used to sit, saw Mama blinking fast, not from tears, but from something that looked like relief. I took a long breath, then said softly, "I accept what's mine. But don't confuse that with forgetting." On the way out, Derek caught me near the doorway. His eyes darted to the floor as he held out a folded piece of paper. "I paid it back," he said. "It's all there." I nodded once. Didn't open it, just tucked it in my purse. Because now, the balance was mine to hold. And for the first time in weeks, the silence that followed me out the door didn't feel heavy. It felt earned. The Friday before homecoming weekend, the church hosted a community business panel. the kind where everybody wears their Sunday best even though it's still Friday and the air smells like perfume, starch, and ambition. They asked me to represent the Taylor Funeral Home. Not Daddy, not Marcus, not Deshawn, me. The invitation had been handwritten, looped letters pressed into heavy paper, addressed directly to Miss Vanessa Taylor, managing partner. For the first time in my life, my name came before the business, not under it. That morning, I stood in front of the mirror, the sunlight coming through thin curtains, dust dancing in the beam like quiet applause. I wore cream blouse, pearl earrings, slacks pressed sharp, my hair pulled back smooth. The way Mama always said made me look like I already owned the room. Camille peeked in. "You nervous?" I smiled at her reflection. "Baby, nerves are for folks who's still asking permission." She grinned, handed me my lipstick. "Then go get what's yours." The church was alive by the time I got there. Fans waving, murmurs rising. The faint buzz of a ceiling fan overhead fighting the Alabama heat. Teachers, elders, local reporters, even a cameraman from Montgomery Local. Ms. Evelyn sat in the front row beside Camille, fanning herself slow. When the host stepped to the mic, his smile found me like a spotlight. "Please welcome Vanessa Taylor, third-generation legacy and business leader of Taylor Funeral Home." The applause rose like a tide, not loud, but deep, a sound that said, "We see you now." But what I didn't expect was to see him, Daddy, walking in alone, charcoal gray church suit, hat in hand, no tie. Behind him, Kendall, Uncle Troy, and Marcus, moving slow, uneasy, like they were stepping into confession. I felt my pulse steady instead of quicken. Power does that to you, once you stop asking for it. I stood when they called my name, didn't clear my throat, didn't adjust the mic, just looked out over every face that had watched me be humiliated months ago, and started. "I've worked in our family's business since I was 15, I said. I've buried strangers and friends, held hands with mothers who couldn't breathe through their grief. A hush settled. The funny thing about death is it reveals the living. Heads nodded, a few amens. And sometimes your biggest test doesn't come in tragedy, I paused, but in betrayal. The air shifted. Even the ceiling fan seemed to hold its breath. I didn't name names, didn't throw dirt. I told the story clean, measured, about the $15,000, the accusations, the silence, the proof I held and never weaponized. How silence, I said, can be grace until it becomes armor. Every word landed like slow thunder. At the end, I held up a single sheet of paper, the deed of gift. I stand here not because someone handed me a legacy, I said, voice steady, but because I refuse to let one be taken. I folded it, slid it back into the envelope, and when the crowd rose, it wasn't pity they gave me, it was respect. Afterward, Daddy approached me outside, under the oak trees behind Mount Zion, same ones I used to race around in patent leather shoes after Sunday service. He moved slow, careful. The breeze tugged at the leaves. The smell of fried catfish from the fellowship hall carried through the air. He stopped a few feet away, hat turning in his hands. No words for a long while. So I filled the silence. "You always told me to guard the family name," I said. "I just never thought I'd be guarding it from the family." He looked up, eyes wet, voice cracked. "I was wrong," he said, then quieter. I didn't know how to pass it on without losing myself. I breathed in, deep, let it sit. "You didn't have to lose anything," I said softly. "You just had to let go." That was the closest thing to forgiveness either of us knew how to give. Later that night, Camille and I drove past the funeral home. Streetlights glowed soft against the brick. The new security cameras blinked red. Steady, patient, unbothered. The sign out front caught the headlights. Taylor and Daughter Funeral Home, since 1979. Camille gasped. "You changed it?" I smiled, watching the letters shimmer through the windshield. That and daughter ain't about ego, I said. It's about correction. Because I wasn't rewriting the story. I was reclaiming my line in it. We pulled into the parking lot. Gravel crunched under the tires. I unlocked the front door with my key. The air inside was cool, faint scent of lilies and lemon polish. I walked straight to the office, the same one Daddy once slammed his hand against when he called me a thief. Opened the safe. New keypad, new passcode. Inside, one envelope sat alone. Cream paper, edges curling slightly from humidity. Labeled in his handwriting, debt cleared, lineage honored, let her lead. My hands trembled just enough for truth to feel real. I didn't cry, didn't need to, because this silence, this time it meant peace. Before I left, I opened the bottom drawer, pulled out the old USB, the one with the footage, the stills, the threats, the truth. I slid it into a small velvet pouch, then into a new safe with a biometric scanner. Pressed my finger. Click. Green light. Then I called Camille over. "Put your finger here, baby." She pressed hers beside mine. The machine beeped. Soft. Final. Her eyes widened. "That mean I got access?" "That means," I said, "you'll never have to fight to prove you belong." She smiled slow, the kind of smile that knows legacy when it touches it. Outside, the streetlight flickered once, then steadied. Church bells rang faint across the hill. The night smelled like rain and redemption. I locked the door, turned the key, and whispered to myself, sometimes the end of a war ain't a victory shout. It's a quiet exhale. And for the first time in months, I breathed easy. The sun rose different that morning. Not louder, not brighter, just softer. The kind of light that doesn't rush in but tiptoes through the blinds like it's checking first to see if you're ready. That's how I measure my healing now. Not by how loud I laugh, but by how still I can be without waiting for another accusation. The grass in front of the funeral home was still wet with dew. That new sign out front, Taylor and Daughter Funeral Home, had settled clean into the soil. Every time the morning wind passed, it made the metal shimmer like the name was breathing. People still did double takes. Some slowed their cars. A few even pulled into the lot just to read it again. "Taylor and Daughter?" they'd ask, half smiling. "New ownership?" I'd just smile back. "Legacy didn't change," I'd say. "It finally got spelled right." The neighborhood adjusted fast. The same people who once whispered at choir rehearsals now brought me casseroles. Pastors sent their parishioners to me directly. The deacons, those same men who'd once ducked my eye in the fellowship hall, now nodded with both hands when I walked in. Not because I yelled, not because I threatened, but because they'd seen what happens when a black woman rises, quietly, completely, and without permission. Camille framed the first invoice that listed me as co-owner, hung it in the hallway right across from that black and white photo of Grandpa Taylor. Same jawline, same eyes. Every morning when I walk by, it feels like a conversation between then and now. I like to think he's proud. Sometimes, when the sunlight hits just right, it throws a warm glow across both frames, his and mine, and I swear it looks like he's nodding. One afternoon, Mama stopped by with a pitcher of sweet tea and a tin of shortbread cookies. She stood in the doorway of my office, purse strap still looped on her arm, as if she wasn't sure she should come in. "I saw the new deed," she said finally. Her voice was soft, like she didn't want to startle the peace that had taken root. "I'm sorry I didn't speak up sooner." I looked up at her. Not with blame, not with bitterness, just, understanding. The kind that comes after a long, slow war. "Mama," I said quietly, "I don't need an apology." She blinked. "Then what you need?" "I need a witness." Something in her eyes changed right then, like she'd been waiting years for permission to tell her truth. She sat down, crossed her ankles neat, and began to talk. Stories I'd never heard before spilled out like secrets buried in linen drawers. about how Grandpa once told her she'd never be more than a preacher's wife, about how she balanced the books behind Daddy's back when the bank almost foreclosed, about how she was the one who ordered the first batch of caskets for the business. Her voice trembled once, then steadied. "I see you now, baby," she said, "and I truly hope, you never stop making them uncomfortable." That line hit deep, like gospel. That night, Camille and I danced in the kitchen. No occasion, just light, just breath, just joy. Stevie Wonder spinning on the record player, the smell of cornbread still hanging in the air, and the faint buzz of the ceiling fan above us. We twirled between the counters, laughing so hard our feet kept slipping on the tile. For once, there was no shadow over our laughter, no silence waiting to interrupt. Black joy at full volume. That's what freedom sounds like. The following weekend, we closed the office early. The air outside was thick with humidity, that late summer kind that sticks to your skin but feels familiar. We hosted a backyard dinner under the magnolia tree. String lights, folding tables, plates of catfish, mac and cheese, and collard greens that glistened under the bulbs. Miss Evelyn said grace. Her voice floated steady, the kind that hushes conversation without effort. And Daddy, he came too. No announcement, no ceremony. Just walked in slow, hat in hand, like peace had to be approached quietly. He didn't say much, didn't need to. When the plates were cleared and the air turned cool, he handed me a small wooden box. It was smooth and worn at the corners. I recognized it immediately. The original safe box. He set it on the table between us and nodded for me to open it. Inside was the old brass key. Taped to the bottom was a folded note, his handwriting shaky but sure. She who carries silence also carries strength. My fingers brushed the metal, still cold, still heavy. I didn't cry. I just placed the key back in the box, closed the lid slow, and passed it to Camille. She looked confused. "What do I do with it?" I smiled. "Whatever you want," I said. "Just don't ever let anybody tell you you didn't earn it." The porch light flickered against her face. The night hummed with crickets and the faint sound of church bells drifting from downtown. Mama laughed softly from the kitchen window. Miss Evelyn hummed an old hymn to herself, and I finally understood what I'd been chasing my whole life. Not Daddy's approval, not the building, not even forgiveness. I wanted the full weight of my own name. Now I carry it with both hands, steady, sacred, signed in silence, not apology. The world still calls it Taylor and daughter, but when I walk through those doors every morning, I whisper to myself, Taylor and survival, Taylor and grace, Taylor and me. Because legacy ain't what you inherit. It's what you refuse to surrender. If you were in my shoes, what would you have done? Tell me in the comments. And if this story found you, hit like, subscribe, and keep your head high. Because sometimes silence is the loudest victory there is.